far back as I've been able to trace it, this land was originally owned by a guy named Uncle Robert. Nobody knows his last name, but if you ask all the old timers around here, his name was Uncle Robert. His grandniece, or it's maybe, I can't remember how many times removed, but anyway, still lives out in the woods, way out there. His nephew was this cranky old man who had big dogs. And when I grew up here, he lived back there too, and he was kind of a scary old man. But we ended up becoming friends later on, and I bought the land that we own now from him. The way it worked, though, is that Uncle Robert owned all this land here, part of which was in apple orchards a long time ago, and there are still some old apple trees around here.
Which have nice, tasty apples.
Which have nice, tasty apples on them, that's right. And he farmed a lot of this land with horses, and there are still some old steel horse-drawn farm implements, like for cutting hay and raking it and whatnot, that are out in the woods. You can, they're still out there. But
I found a horseshoe and a plow thing.
That's right, a horseshoe and plow thing. So anyway, my mother's dad, who was the son of Polish immigrants, bought 5 acres from Uncle Robert. This area right here is the original area that he bought, kind of out to the end of the driveway and then down to the road down there. And it's one of the highest points, highest and driest and sandiest points in Montcalm County. So it's terrible soil for growing stuff. He bought about 5 acres, which then passed down to my dad and my mom once they got married. My dad bought another 8 acres from Uncle Robert, which extends out to my driveway out there, and then recently we bought another 23 acres, which is that big open area way out there, out beyond those pine trees. So that's the portion of land that we bought recently. It was slated to become a housing subdivision. There's actually, we'll take you down there to see, but there's a road that goes through part of it. When the housing economy sort of tanked, it sat fallow for about 15 or 20 years, and we bought it to turn it back into farmland, which is what it had been prior to digging the road through it. So there's still remnants of the road, and I'm waiting anxiously to borrow a bulldozer from a neighbor and just plow that road back in. It'll be a great moment to just plow it in and turn it back into farmland. So eventually that's the plan out there. So what we're going to do is just take you around. I want to show you some of the fields and the soil and talk about what we do here. And then we'll see the animals, and then we'll have a chance to go through the garden and pick a few things if you're interested in doing so. Pick them then, and we'll end up, of course, in the blueberry patch again. So, okay, so we'll start the ride now. Hang on to your seats. Basically beach sand, and it's dust. The upside of the beach sand and the gravel that grows here in West Michigan, Southwest Michigan, is that it's easy to plow and work up and work things into. But the bad part about it is that it needs constant water, otherwise things don't do very well. So the more water you have, the better it is. So the process of sort of turning this into a workable garden and farm was sort of begun by my dad, who was born in and raised on the west side of Grand Rapids. He grew up in the area of like St. James Church there, and he was a city boy, and he was one of 11 children, and yet both he and one of his brothers became pretty avid farmers and gardeners. My dad was an English teacher at the local high school here in Greenville for 35 years. But throughout our life as we were growing up here, we worked in the garden and grew most of our own food. And only now have we sort of begun to expand to the larger community. We did sell strawberries and pigs and things along the way too, but mostly it was for our own uses. And so the beginning of the process of amending the soil and making it better was it's sort of a combination of putting a lot of composted plant matter into it, leaves and grass and that sort of thing, but then also animal manure, which is wonderful for improving the soil. So we had a little bit of everything going in order to improve the soil and help build it up. I'm also one of 11 children, like my dad was. My mom and dad had 11 kids, 5 girls and 6 boys. I was it's sort of a fate thing, I don't know, or something, but I was the first child born after they moved here to the farm. And from fairly early on in my life, when most of my friends were becoming rebellious teenagers, I went the other way and decided I liked farming and I was going to be a good kid and work on the farm. So I began to work a lot on the farm and take an interest in it. It began with a paper I wrote in high school called "Say No to Drugs, Garden Organically." And so that was kind of the beginning of a long process of learning more about organic gardening, which my father had been doing from day one. Before it was cool, you know, to be doing organic gardening, he was doing it. And through that process, really kind of mastered a lot of the methods and things for gardening and growing things organically. This field that we're in now is part of the land that I bought here, and we use it to grow grain on. The grain was harvested recently. We use the grain to feed our animals, and we wanted to start growing a lot of our own grains to feed the chickens and the pigs especially. Cows don't really need it so much, but the chickens and pigs do, and we wanted to start growing our own organic grain without any pesticides or chemical fertilizers on it. And so that's what we've begun to do here in this area. This was spelt, which is a cross between wheat and rye. It's an old grain. What we're doing now is sort of tilling it under, and then because we don't like to leave the soil bare for very long, we'll sow oats on it, and the oats will grow up about this tall, and then we'll be tilling them back in for what they call green manure. You add those green nutrients back into the soil, really help to improve it and get it ready for next season. So one of the other ways that we've worked on improving the soil is that, like I said, composted leaves and grass. We now have an agreement with the township here that they don't pick up leaves, I guess, anymore for the people on their sidewalk, and so people can come and put them here instead. Actually, there's a drop-off site down there. There's just a little bit there now, but at the end of the fall, like right before winter starts, there's a pile of leaves, you know, higher than I can reach and about 30 feet long. It's just this huge pile of leaves and grass from all over the place. So we use those for mulching in between plants to keep weeds down. We compost them and then fill them into the soil, and it helps to build up the soil. So we were looking at those satellite, you know, images that you can see of your own land and whatever. And from 10 years ago, the soil has already become a little darker, which is nice to see. It used to look like bright white beach sand, and so the gardens and stuff up there on my dad's land have probably over the years. I was thinking, we were talking about this once, how much cow manure and straw and pig manure and horse manure and every other kind of manure and leaves and everything else we've just tossed into the soil, and the soil just eats it up, this sandy soil. But we've added a lot to the soil, and so that's kind of the basis of the whole thing, is the soil. Benefit from what we bring into the fields, but then they also put back into the fields. So this is the beginning of these are Cornish rock cross chickens. These are the same kind of chickens you get in the store, but they're raised a little differently than the ones you get in the store. Has anyone ever seen the documentary Food Incorporated? Yes. Yeah. So if you've seen that, you remember the first scene where they're like checking little chickens in their pens or whatever, and they're raised in confinement these guys are confined, but it's all sunlight and air, and they get moved twice a day. So we moved them once this morning, we'll move them again this afternoon. So they're always on fresh pasture, and they eat the greens, they eat the weed seeds, they eat bugs that are in there. They provide a quarter of their own food just by being moved. We do also feed them the grain that we grow in the fields. And these guys are 8 weeks old, they grow like crazy. They're happy and healthy, and we actually put, my son Jonah here has a donkey, which we'll see in a little bit, but he gets stationed out here at night and protects them from predators. We've never lost one to predators yet. As long as Jack is staked out here, they're safe. So he's the guardian donkey. Which people actually, apparently people use these miniature donkeys for guarding sheep as well and things. They'll just put one out with them. And I never realized that he's just this quiet little animal. He just sort of like Eeyore, you know, and Winnie the Pooh. He just sort of hangs his head down all the time and mopes. But we brought a dog up here once. Somebody had lost a dog, and it stayed at our house for a couple of days until they brought it. Well, anyway, I brought the dog up here last year once, and Jack was transformed from this mild-mannered little donkey into this like fighting machine. He like chased the dog around, he kicked the dog, he was biting at him, and the dog ran off after about 10 seconds. It was crazy. I couldn't believe it. So, but anyway, this is the way that we raised the chickens. That larger pen we have egg layers in that are being raised. And once the egg layers like to fly and roost, the larger birds don't. There's an egg box in there too, so that when they get big enough, you can collect the eggs from the outside. But yeah, we just pull them along twice a day. They get new pasture, and it's interesting because in confinement they don't hardly ever get any sort of greenery as part of their diet, but they actually like the stuff. They eat greens. They like to eat clover and grass and weed seeds, all sorts of stuff. So those are our own egg layers. So they range around free, and actually what they do, part of their job, is to clean up whatever feed these guys leave behind. So they're just free range. Eventually this will all be fenced in, and they'll be a little more managed too, but they're kind of like my children now, they're free range. So they just run around wherever, but they lay their eggs in that little shed there, and we just collect them there for our own use. So anyway, that's the chickens. The piggies are now out of their pen, and also wanted to see you. What we use the pig for, pigs are sort of nature's rototillers. What we do is, once a section of garden has been finished and harvested, we'll fence it in, and we put the pigs on it for a week or two, and they'll root it all up, they'll eat the weeds, and they'll find anything that we missed. So that particular place was potatoes. There's still some potatoes out here that we have to dig up. But they've been there for a few days, and they'll be there for a little while longer until we get the potatoes dug up. And then eventually this whole big area and that corn back there will all be fenced in. It'll just get bigger. And they'll be able to, they eat whatever's left over. They root up the soil as a sort of preparation for mechanical tilling. And they're happy. They are happy pigs rooting around in the dirt and just finding whatever potatoes or whatever we left in the soil, so they eat all of that stuff. And they're also very, very healthy. So they're an important part of it too. And that's the same sort of thing. They put their manure back into the soil where we want it, so we don't have to clean up after them. And they eat the grains that we bring in from the fields, as well as whatever produce they can find that's left over. Plus we throw them a lot of the old stuff, like a corn cobs and whatever, just get tossed in there and get eaten up. So they get lots of fresh food from the garden too.
How many % of green that they eat?
It's interesting, you know, we had them over here, which was that tilled up area there was a bean patch, and they have in that little metal box free food. They can have grain whenever they want it. It's right there. And yet they were grunting and fussing, and what is the matter with these guys? They wanted more greens. And so it's probably 10 to 15% of their diet is green stuff. So even, so after they've been in a place for a while, you can tell because they start to get fussy because the greens are gone. They still have food, but they get fussy because they want more green stuff. So then we just make the pen bigger, and or we'll pull up old plants from the garden that are, you know, over the hill, and we'll just toss them in there, and they're happy. So that's a good way to make friends with pigs, is you just throw them corn cobs and old bean plants and whatever. So it's a great way to make friends. So we'll take you around now, and we'll take a look at our the cows, our small little cow herd. mamas and 2 babies here. The little guy was just born about a week ago or so, and their names are Ellie and Cinnamon and Gus and April, and then there's Jack the donkey over there too. But we do the same thing with them. They're moved every day. This fence all rolls up on our roll, and they get moved onto new grass every day. So
that's a donkey.
they're an important part of the farm in that they, other than they produce a lot of milk, and they feed all of these little kids running around here. But then also they produce a lot of fertilizer for the garden, so in the form of their cow pies. So cow pies are great. Once they're composted, they're like the best fertilizer ever. So we actually just took one of our cows in to be butchered. It's our second grass-fed steer that we've raised, so we're trying to get better at that so we can do more grass-fed beef, which is the healthiest kind, and it's really good. These are Jersey cows, which are known for their high production of milk that has tons of fat in it. It's awesome. Like this much cream on the top, you know, just wonderful. So we make butter and yogurt, and we're learning how to make cheese from their milk. So we milk them just once a day. The calves are with them all day long, and so they can nurse as much as they want, and then at night we separate the big calf off. The little calf stays on until he gets bigger. We separate him off because otherwise we don't get any milk. The calf drinks it all. That little calf over there who's as fat as a barrel is, her name's April. She was born in April. And she's growing very nicely, but we've been breeding them to miniature Jersey bulls so that we can have smaller cows. The miniature Jerseys they're smaller and they don't eat quite so much, but they still produce quite a bit of milk. So we'll see what happens. We're on our second generation now, so a few generations they'll be getting smaller, hopefully. And if you ever want to make friends with a cow, all you have to have is some green apples. Get them to follow; they'll follow you anywhere. So a lot of our plants, especially the smaller ones, the greens, lettuces, bok choy, stuff like that, the smaller things, a lot of them we start in these soil blocks. This is an old European way of starting plants. You basically compress soil into a little cube, and then the plants they naturally prune themselves with their roots when they reach the air. It sort of hits the air and it stops growing there. So they stay in their own little cube. So when it comes time to plant, you put an individual lettuce seed in each little cube, and then once they're all up and growing and about yay tall, then we move them out to the field. This is actually a top secret gizmo. I made this one that makes 50 of them at a time because I was sick and tired of making 4 of them at a time. So they have ones out there that make 4 at a time. And so, oh my gosh, you're right. And shiny thing. And so anyway, we start the plants in these little modular cubes, and then once they're growing and up really big, it's nice because it doesn't take any packaging. There's no plastic thing you have to get out of it and waste or whatever. You can reuse these trays over and over and over again. So, but this is where it all starts with these little cubey things. We start planting in February, sort of maybe toward the end of February, but we start planting in February. And we raise them in the house for a while by the fireplace where it's warm, and then once it gets a little warmer, we move them out here to the greenhouse. They're in here for a while, and then they go out to the field. Underneath these hoops, see those white hoops there? There's this white fabric that we put over the top of them. It's an air and water permeable fabric that lets the water and air kind of move in and out, but it keeps it about 5 to 10 degrees warmer in there even at night, even when it's dark. So it protects them from frost and things. We'll walk out to the garden now, and if you all have a box with you, and you can pick whatever you want out there and fill up your box with stuff as we go along. So here you can see some of the basil. hard to get out. You need a shovel.
Carrots. We got the. These are what I call carrots.
I call those carrots too.
So there was a wise man who said that the protection of the family is the home, and the protection of the home is the homestead. So the way the family goes, so goes the nation. And so what we're really about is just creating an environment where family is strong, and where the community is stronger because of the family, and where the nation is stronger because of the community. So, healthy land, healthy plants, healthy animals, healthy children, healthy people, healthy community, healthy everybody. That's it.